Baby, baby.
What up, people? It's your boy NotoriousSA, aka Steve Anderson, aka no longer coughing. Had a rough week. I had COVID for the second time, had a cough that would not go away. It was really terrible. Tried to make a podcast. A bunch of stuff got in the way, but I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to be back after my last episode featuring my interview with Kim Cavill. And I'm happy to report that Kim Cavill ended up winning re-election. She ended up getting the most votes of anyone on that slate, so for many of the people that hated on her, they got the exact opposite of what they wanted. And as a matter of fact, one of the candidates on the opposing slate, Mark Kramer, ended up losing his seat due to a surge of mail-in ballots for another challenger, whom I also voted for. So, you know, the local school board elections went down pretty much exactly as one would expect, where the crazy candidates lost and the normal candidates won. 2023 repeats 2022, which repeats 2021, which repeats 2020, etc., etc. And now that leads me into the main focus of today's podcast, which I am currently on the road, so if the audio sounds a bit off, my apologies, but I've got the urge and I feel like I gotta talk and I feel like I need to say it, so here I am. I'm saying it, and holy shit, folks, has there been a lot of stuff that's happened. Obviously, the biggest story that has dominated the news is the now 2 indictments of the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. One in New York State for falsifying business records, which, it's a crime, but it seems like it's a bit much in terms of actually doing something for his legal jeopardy. However, this federal indictment, the federal indictment of Donald J. Trump, is a masterclass in how to write an indictment, how to get someone on the most obvious evidence imaginable. For those of you who don't know, source in the description, Donald J. Trump was indicted for breaking numerous federal crimes as a result of him taking classified information he was no longer allowed to have after January 20th, 2021 at noon. He effectively ceased to be president, therefore any classified documents in his belonging that is government property he did not declassify, despite the assumptions that he didn't, that everything that he has, he was allowed to take. And of course, there was a search, there were subpoenas, there was plans to ignore subpoenas, there's audio recordings of him. He just confessed to the crime on Bret Baier's show a few days ago, and you would think that this is the perfect opportunity for the Republican Party to just be like, you know what? It's over, right? Even though we stood by him by the insurrection and we went through another loss of election cycles, you think this has got to be it, right? The man staring down prison time for stealing classified documents. They got him dead to rights on this one. Pending some divine intervention from a judge or some MAGA jurors who get him out of trouble. If the law holds like it should, Donald J. Trump will be convicted of federal crimes. And he should not be president of the United States again. That seems pretty goddamn clear. But even still, we're still seeing polling results showing him at the top of the ticket, fading and losing support, and now with nearly a quarter of the Republican Party saying they'll never vote for Trump again. So, welcome to the Never Trump team, everybody. Happy to have everyone. But still, they're still standing by him. They're still standing by him. And I just want to do a thing real quick here. This is personal to me. So, when I really got invested in the Republican Party, there were 2 main bad guys I was dealing with. On the Democratic side, locally, it was Michael Madigan, the, at the time, powerful Speaker of the Illinois House. And the other side was Donald Trump, the celebrity real estate politician turned president and now cult leader of the Republican Party. You know, what's happened since my political evolution in the Republican Party is that Mike Madigan, while having the support of the Democratic Party, eventually lost it. It took too long, and too many of them covered for him in way too many ways, but he eventually was federally indicted and no longer serves in the Illinois General Assembly. He's no longer pulling the strings for the Democratic Party as far as I know. He still has old hands and old operations in place, but you know, the systems change it on their end. Republican Party has continued to double, triple, and quadruple down on former President Trump, despite the fact that he is an electoral loser and a national security risk. The problem is that there's enough people have left the party where that the civilized can no longer fully take control, as the MAGA crowd now has a sizable base that prevents a clear majority from emerging unless, of course, people just give in to Trump. So despite the fact that we have a Nikki Haley, a Tim Scott, a Ron DeSantis, Larry Elder, and a bunch of other no-name people running for office, we do have a few people who are telling the truth, like former governors Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, who frankly are the only two candidates, in my mind, worth voting for at this point, because the only people explaining what's actually happening, everyone else is ignoring the truth about Donald Trump or trying to go to his right, which, again, we're not playing regular games here, folks. You're dealing with a personality cult. The personality cult is not going to want someone that is kind of like Trump, or as they try to sell you, the Trump policies without the mean tweets and the personality. No one gives a shit about the policies. That's just something they say to make it sound like there's an intellectual backing behind it. But in reality, the policy is whatever Donald Trump decides that day is important. Everyone was pro-free trade up until Trump won. Then all of a sudden tariffs were cool. Everybody was pro-tax cuts until Trump was president. Then tax increases were cool. Everybody was, tough on Russia until Trump was president. Then all of a sudden Ukraine is the problem and we need to understand Russia more. It's just, people are, and especially politicians, people take the path of least resistance, much like the substance they're made up of most, water. And unfortunately, right now in the Republican Party, the path of least resistance is just to ignore or support President Trump. Now, this has been stressed by numerous polls that have come through the years, is that the Republican primary electorate is in its own world compared to literally everyone else. Democrats, independent, even the never-Trump Republicans have a better sense of what's going on than true Republican primary voters. Because not only has it changed over time, not only has it gone from being, educated suburbanites and ex-urbanites trying to, come from the country club to reduce taxes and maybe, throw a little social conservatism here and there. Now the parties have been transferred to the ex-urban and the rural areas of the country, where power has been given to conspiracy theorists and the crazy people who have the time, and they continue to lean into the conspiracies and the nonsense and, of course, into Trump. Because that is what is being sold by the grifters and the shady, shifty consultants who are only in it to make a buck. And frankly, they all know Donald Trump's a loser. They don't care. They're willing to take the money for it. And I already know that there's going to be if Trump is the nominee in 2024, not only will the Republican Party probably have the worst electoral year since 2018, it may legitimately not survive that election. It may lose so much power by nominating someone who is on the verge of federal imprisonment that it may flip more state legislators and more Senate seats, and it may flip the House back to the Democrats in 2024. Because the current 2022 Republican majority is trash. And they're embarrassing, and they can't do anything, really. They're getting outplayed in every way, shape, or form. Joey B is walking into another 4 years. Pending some horrific tragedy that happens, Joseph Robinette Biden will be the president again for 4 more years. And at this point, unless a Republican emerges that I'm willing to vote for, he's going to have my support. The man's making deals, getting things done, leading on Ukraine, being tough on Russia, getting manufacturing produced. Joey B went from being the joke of the Obama years to one of the saviors of American democracy. That is crazy. For anyone who's been in politics a long time, the idea that Joseph Biden became not only the president, but like one of the most important presidents in American history by virtue of succeeding the worst president in American history is one of those, fun twists that many years down the road I'm sure people will come to appreciate. I'm truly amazed that the grifting is so powerful and the insanity is still so dug in that the Republican Party cannot see that it's bleeding to death from the parasites. Donald Trump is a giant parasite sucking money and time and energy. And frankly, the most important thing is that there are plenty of young people who want to get involved in politics and maybe don't like the Democratic Party because it's a machine in many places like where I live. But the Republican Party is a fucking joke in the state, or it's corrupt as it is in all the places where they have power. So what you're seeing nationally is people my age and younger voting Democratic at higher and higher rates with no sign of switching and no sign of ever coming back to the Republican Party. And as the Republican base gets older and whiter and more rural, it's going to lose people. Like, they do not do mail-in voting, they do not get enough people out there, and their voters are literally dying. They've been dying from COVID, from not being vaccinated. They're dying from diabetes, from being in a place where there's no health care. They're dying from old age because that's who the Republican Party appeals to now, almost exclusively the 65 and older crowd, and not even for reasons that matter, only because Donald Trump said he wouldn't cut Social Security and Medicare. It's just mind-boggling that a party with millions and millions and millions of voters and dollars and a sizable portion of us who know that Donald Trump is wrong for this country and for the Republican Party and for the presidency cannot take control of this party back from insane people. January 20th, 2017 was where the Rubicon was crossed, where the establishment form of the Republican Party lost control to the entertainment wing of the party. And the entertainment wing of the party, which considers itself to be super smart and the real patriots and are always on TV talking about how great their ideas are and how much they fight, they're really good at raising money for themselves and being selfish, but they're terrible at an overall political strategy. Circa the 2022 elections, where people were mad and upset, and normally the president's party loses in the first midterms. They didn't just lose, right? Granted, they lost the House, but barely. But they gained in the Senate and in state houses. They won abortion rulings all across the country. Roe v. Wade continues to animate the Democratic base, the overturn of it, I should say. And as we hear more and more plans from these people who just lie and say, we're not going to do a national ban, and then we are, and then we're not going to do this, and then we're doing it because we just have to listen to our base voters, even though they're stupid and don't understand anything. And you know what? I'm not running for office. I'm not working for any candidates at the moment. If anybody gets offended that I say that, too fucking bad, alright? It is too fucking bad that the Republican Party has self-selected its own set of voters to pick ignorant people to not only be in charge of the elections, but be on the candidates for office. And believe me, there was a few people I have voted for in the last few years, Republicans who are actually not insane people or empty suits, but they're getting harder to vote for because there's less of them. I try to get them out of primaries into general elections, but no, they lose to insane anti-Semites, i.e. Darren Bailey. And it's just totally fucking mind-boggling that the Republican Party still, at this very moment, wants Donald Trump to be the president again. It's because all rationality is lost. It's gone. I was hoping it would come back after 2021, but we're in 2023. And it just keeps getting worse. And they just keep sticking with it. You know, for a multitude of reasons. Some of them are in it for the money. Some of them are truly insane. Some of them are afraid for their lives. And some of them are just craven opportunists who will gladly abandon him the second it becomes a political reality for them. You know, they'll always say that the Never-Trumpers we were always right. Trump was never to have been in office in the first place. But instead of just, you know, looking to us, the people who have been making and breaking the elections these last, 6 cycles, if you include off years, they don't care. They try to mock you. They say that you're the problem. You're a Never-Trumper. You're a fake Republican, rhino Democrat, which apparently you can just throw to everybody, including everyone who's ever worked for President Trump. Which is truly amazing that the man could hire so many people and only hires the best. And they're all fake rhino globalist scum. And yet the people who stayed with him, who were either insane or went to jail for him, they're the real American patriots. I hypothesized many years back that the reason we got to this point is after Obama's election in 2008, the Republican Party got scared because he had gotten more votes than anybody else. He was super popular. He was the wave of the future. He talked and walked in ways that, he just projected swag. And in many ways, he had enough of a crossover value to get Republicans to vote for him. So, what did they do? They went scorched earth. And it became, oppose Obama at all costs. And suddenly that became the defining feature of the Republican Party. Which led to the ultimate anti-Obama, which was Trump, who was lucky enough to capture a plurality of voters in primary. Real talk, I actually just took a phone call while I was recording this podcast, and obviously it's not part of it, but I sort of lost my train of thought. So wherever I was, I'm just going to get back on the ground because I need to get this out of my system. Man, it's just... in the last episode before my interview with Kim Cavill, I talked about how the GOP is going to have a rough decade. Since then, it's only gotten worse. The Supreme Court's had another Supreme Court case, whose name I cannot think of at the moment, but it will be in the link description, in which they said that Alabama had a map that was unfairly racially gerrymandered. And that particular ruling could increase the amount of minority congressional districts across the entire country. Removing some of the negative racial gerrymandering that was done in 2010 and in 2020 by other states that tried to pull the same maneuvers. As we have more fair elections, we don't have just, first past the post primaries and very gerrymandered districts. As you get more fair districts established and you have things like, ranked choice voting and open other primaries, you're going to see the Republican Party lose way more often. Their success was built on partially artificial grounds. Because even though the voters in many states are nearly equal to or outnumber Republican voters, the way that legislative seats are drawn gives GOP legislators far more power. And places like Wisconsin are a good example of this, where it's generally pretty even, but the state assembly is controlled by the Republican Party. However, their state Supreme Court just flipped, and so did most of their offices flipped in 2018, many of the statewide offices. But again, this is what you see, like with Pennsylvania and other places. In Arizona, where Republicans control the legislature, but on a whole statewide vote, they're getting Democrat votes. It means that if they start drawing districts that are really, truly proportionate, Republicans are not going to win with their current makeup of voters. And look, I have been literally on the forefront of the issue of trying to make the Republican Party more diverse the entire time I've been in it. I've worked officially for 3 Republican candidates in my life. I worked for one Democrat. He was a white man. I worked for a conservative woman for one race. I worked for an Indian immigrant for a second race. And then I worked for a black mayor on my third race. I believe the Republican Party has the kind of core principles and values that can attract, marginalized people and provide them an outlet that's not the Democratic Party. Because the original Republican Party, which they love to brag about but seem to not connect the message to, is that we were founded as an anti-slavery, pro-freedom party. Many of the the radical Republicans, as they were called back in the day, were some of the initial pushers of abolition and emancipation. Things that we take for granted now, which were highly controversial ideas that could get you killed in the 1850s and 60s. And they did, with a war in Bleeding Kansas and all these terrible things that happened when people were trying to fight the scourge of slavery out. That party, the party of Abraham Lincoln, has now devolved into the party of Donald Trump. And of course, you've got your Dinesh D'Souza's and every other grifter saying that, he's better than Lincoln and it's more popular and all this other stuff. And it's all bullshit. It's all crap. It's all just people trying to make money, whether it's Salem News Media and all the other garbage, or Newsmax, or even Fox, which has this weird relationship with Trump now, and CNN, which also has this sort of weird relationship with Trump now, and it's like, this is the problem, is that the system is working just enough for some people to keep the status quo going. What do I mean by just enough? Right? It means just enough Republicans want Donald Trump in charge to keep him the face of the party. And of course that means that enough Democrats are going to keep coming out to support Democrats because Donald Trump is the face of the party. So you have this constant problem where we feed this cycle of Trump is the face, the Republican Party gets more like Trump, he also becomes the face of the opposition, which increases the size of the liberals and the Democrats and all that jazz. And frankly, not even just that. There are, and I got this term from Tim Miller over at the Bulwark, these Red Dog Democrats, former suburban Republicans who now vote for the Democratic Party because that party is proving itself to be, competent and sane. Or for many of them, it just no longer reflects the party they understood and grew up in. Many of them, traditional, we call them Reaganites, since most of the Rockefeller Republicans are gone now. The Reaganites are the old school ones, the ones who were pro-free market, pro-free trade, pro-low taxes, smaller government, all that jazz, right? It's now become big government when we want it, pro-life except for when the baby's born, pro-gun way too much to have a safe handling of firearms in this country, along with just defending a madman and a criminal because that's what the base wants. It's become debauchery. Total fucking debauchery in the Republican Party at this point. And what are you going to do, right? The laws are changing, the demographics are changing. If 2010 through 2020 was the peak of the Republican Party in this country, 2020 through 2030 will surely see its, if not total, then almost complete collapse. It is already a joke in many of the largest states in the country. California, New York, Illinois. And New York I have to put an asterisk on because they won a bunch of congressional seats in the 2022 election, hence their ability to flip the House. But these same Republicans are pretty moderate, and they voted for things like infrastructure, and many of them are not as huge fans of Trump because they're in suburbs where he's not super popular. That asterisk aside, everywhere else, the Democratic Party is gaining. Unless it's in a state where they literally have no chance, like Oklahoma. And even that, it's still rough. But they're making famous people. In Tennessee, they kick out legislators who speak out against gun violence and make them from literal local politicians to national celebrities overnight. Young, smart, articulate, young men and women in Montana as well, where they're speaking out eloquently and getting national television and raising money. And the Republican Party, instead of trying to either deal with it in a way that makes sense or, just embrace diversity because it's a good thing, continues to circle inward with the base. Someone almost just drove in front of me and hit me. So, sorry, random aside. keep toning the base. And the base is stupid. And I'm sorry, but I have to keep saying that because they don't make rational decisions. They're being powered by zealots and grifters. People who literally believe the insane and people who are catering to the insane. There's too many people just letting it go because they don't want to be kicked out, or it's been their whole life, or it's their profession. And it shouldn't be like this, man. There were so many good people I met between 2015 and 2017 who I really got to understood and know, and it made me change my perception of, Republicans and Democrats, and I've grown as a person, and I've learned that my own political values are not as clear-cut as, I thought they were. And as you grow and learn and expand and deal with things as you learn in life, that happens. I'm a Republican. I've voted in the Republican primary since 2016. I have been a delegate to the state convention twice, 2016 and 2020. I have voted for proposals in those conventions. I have served as a precinct captain, a poll watcher, and a polling precinct technician. I've done everything from registering people to vote to inspecting ballots after an election. I've been in every part of the process from the Republican Party. And yet they still treat me like I'm the problem. They treat me like I'm the impediment to their success. Even though I show them the data, I show them the testimonials, we have the real world results in our hand, and yet we're at this détente where they won't admit they're wrong, and they won't give me more leverage over what happens. It's not a pity party, I don't care. I got a nice job. I'm happy where I'm at. I don't need to work in politics again. I'd be more than happy to just work my regular job and do this on the side. And, but I want people to be involved in the process. I want good people to run for office. I want good people in positions of elective authority because it matters. It matters who's in charge of your library board and your school board and your state rep and your state senator and the fucking president of the United States. It matters who is in charge of these positions. Just had a hiccup. Live recording. It matters who you put there. Because not only does it affect the capacity of this person to do their job, but if this person's an elected official and part of a brand or a party, they can drag the whole thing down with them if they're terrible at it. I often ask myself, what are you going to do? You write your letters to the editor, you support candidates who you think should win, you work for those candidates, and you don't give up the fight. There's not much else you can do, really. You just have to accept that, people are going to make bad decisions. Because they're caught up in a moment, in a movement that they probably did not want, but it's too late to turn back now, and they feel compelled to stay with Trump and all their terrible Trump-like candidates because that's what their own audience wants to hear. And part of this is, as circles of information have sort of collapsed around the conservative movement, it seems quite clear-cut to me that despite the occasional reference to, many of these places do not trust or do not read things like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune. They don't trust CNN, NBC, ABC, legacy media, or corporate media as they like to call it. Which, it's media. They make mistakes. They get things wrong. But conservative media is not actually meant to be based in reality. It's meant to be entertainment. It's meant to cater to people who feel a certain way and who want to feel like they're getting the real news, not the stuff that is being shoved down their throats. And of course, this real news is usually just people telling them what they want to hear, cherry-picking evidence and stories to confirm to what they want. The Daily Wires, the the Newsmaxes, all these places, all the Trump acolyte systems that have popped up behind him, the Steve Bannon war rooms. As people have cut themselves off into their own information cycles, and as someone who, in my own weird, sick way, enjoys listening to this, partially for the cringe, but partially as a understanding of just kind of the human experiment of what happens when you all get in groupthink and can't get out of it. Because I can very easily turn off conservative talk radio and watch The View and listen to The Bulwark and go about my day and not think about what I heard on Chicago's Morning Answer thinking that's the truth. But there are many people who do not change the channel. They're stuck on AM 560, The Answer. They're stuck on Fox. They're stuck on Newsmax. They're stuck on something because they don't trust anything else. And they have to keep getting confirmation bias to get what they want. And they're not able to understand that the world does not work the way they think it does. Grown-ass people who should know better, who have either bought into it or have been tricked into it, or maybe they were just sociopaths the whole time and just went along with it because they could and they knew they could make money off of it and wanted to hurt people they didn't like. It's often said that during the Trump years that the cruelty is the point, and it does feel like that. It does feel like the whole point is to be objectively cruel to people that are politically opposed to you or you think are evil, which those two things aren't the same, and people shouldn't act like that. Because the attitude only works on a certain number of people, and that number of people gets smaller every year. And as other people, independents and leaners from different parties start to take shape and form and make these coalitions that we're going to have going forward, the Republican Party is not gaining enough new voters to make up for the ones who are going to die. That is a logistical fact. They claim to be increasing their diversity, but it's bullshit. As the last election cycle tells you, they knew what worked in 2020, and they decided to skip all that and stick with the people that Trump endorsed. You know who won in 2020 on the Republican side? Women, minorities, and veterans. You know who they picked in 2022? Bunch of white guys who were all pro-Trump. Brilliant. Fucking brilliant. And as someone who worked on the campaigns in 2022, the establishment side of the Republican Party and the MAGA side of the Republican Party, whether or not you consider them separate, which many do, but in many cases they're not, there's a grift going on both sides. Many of the same people who have always been like this for years, they switch between government and campaign jobs, they're just there for the check and the money, and they really didn't give a shit whether or not somebody won, and they didn't understand what the voting base wanted. And then the voting base obviously hates those people for those exact reasons, but decide that to get back at them, they'll elect somebody that no one wants to vote for. Not even normal people. The establishment people won't vote for them, and the MAGA-based people, there's not enough of them to actually win an election. Then you get your Darren Bailey situations, which was just that all over the entire country. That's the 2022 election in a nutshell. Let's pick the worst possible candidate and put them up with the worst possible message. That's the message. And that's what we're going to keep doing in 2023 and 2024 because we're fucking stupid and cannot get past it. Honestly, this isn't really a coherent episode at all. It's more of a rant, but it's been too long. I needed to put something out, and you know what? It's going to be a short episode. I'm going to try. I always say that every time, but you guys know what it is. I'm going to try to put it up. I don't know when I'm going to do the next one. I'm not consistent at all in any way, shape, or form, even though I try to be. But hey, I just give my honest opinion as I see it when I feel the need to. And if you're still listening at this point, if you're still catching on, still hanging there, and still enjoying these rants, then you know what? Good for you. I'm happy, and I'm glad you're listening. It's amazing in this day and age, and all the technology we have, that anybody can record their voice on a phone, anywhere, and upload it to a website like, which is now Spotify, place I do my podcast on, and it now has access to billions of people. I'm not getting billions of views, obviously. Feel free to step it up, but, you know, I've been listened to in multiple countries, which I didn't even imagine would ever happen. I'm amazed that people, even if its numbers aren't that great, that people still listen to what I have to say. And if they like my interviews with people, and they like my research, and they like the work I do, then, throw in some support. There's a financial link on the website, NotoriousSA.com. Or just, share the episode, send me a comment, NotoriousSA Podcast at gmail.com, all the socials, it's all there. If anybody has anything that's worth investigating and want me to talk about, I'd be happy to do it. It's just, life gets busy, man. News happens, you want to talk about something, if you're not doing it professionally, by the time you even get the podcast recorded, who knows what could have happened in the 35 minutes I've been recording this? I don't know. Nuclear bomb could have gone off somewhere and I'd already be out of date. But I'd probably see it here already. But the important thing is that if you're out there and you've got a creative project like a podcast, even if you only do it as often as you can, try to do it. It feels good. It felt good to get this all out. It felt good to just sort of say and rant and do what I want. If people want to listen to it and hear me rant about my problems with the Republican Party, by all means, enjoy it. You don't like it, you hate listening, whatever. A listen's a listen. It is what it is. What I will tell you is that life can be difficult, but it can also be pretty great. And things are looking up for everyone everywhere. COVID is down despite my second case of it. People aren't dying of it as much. And, unemployment continues to be low. The economy continues to be growing. Inflation's coming down. And things seem to be kind of just correcting themselves after a rough couple of years there. Will the Republican Party get its act together in time to join this prosperity and figure out what to do and the proper way to do it? I don't imagine so. I imagine simply that they will continue to stick with Trump until he is imprisoned and or dead. At which point there will be a power vacuum where someone will try to act like him, but they will not get the same results. Those same people will not come back. And the Republican Party will continue to suffer and lose elections for the next decade, as I mentioned earlier. Now, pending any possible changes, any new circumstances that arrive, or any evidence that changes my mind, I'm willing to draw a different conclusion. But right now, that's where we're at. The Republican Party is in a death spiral of behind Trump. Trump does bad stuff, makes it bad for all of them, continues to circle the wagons. Trump does bad stuff. The circle gets smaller and tighter and angrier. And it's going to lose elections. It's going to mean that many good conservative ideas will be tossed aside because they've been associated with Trump. Sometimes from conservatives who throw out their own good ideas to say Trump's bad ones because that's what his people want to hear. And there's too many opportunists who are craven and power hungry who have decided that this is the way it is. And it's unfortunate. But, I'm going to post this, and it's just going to be, honestly, it just feels like kind of a throwaway episode. I'm not even going to lie to you. But I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to get it out. And it's, it is what it is. So I wish everyone the best. I hope to come up with something soon. Maybe I'll do something for the 4th of July. I don't know. But what I want to tell you is that keep on keeping on. Keep your podcast up. Keep the support up. And I hope to see you guys next time. NotoriousSA out.
Yeah.